We'll fire one off here to make sure everything's working properly and also draw on everyone else who wanted to actually come. So go through this one quick and then we'll get down to the demonstration. We're underway. Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the musket demonstration. So what I'm firing for you guys this afternoon is a US model 1816 musket. This is kind of the newest and the best thing coming out of the armories in the time period, being issued to US troops and purchased by a lot of militia as well in the time period. But essentially the flintlock mechanism that actually makes this thing work is a very old system of ignition that you see on these guns that goes back to the 17th century. Essentially though, what you have is a piece of flint. It's a very hard, very sharp stone right here, held inside the jaws of the hammer. When that falls forward, it's going to strike this piece right here called the prison or the pan steel. The steel on there, once it's actually scraped by the flint, again being very hard, is actually going to scrape off little tiny bits of steel, and the friction from that actually turns those things really, really hot so they look like sparks. So if I spark the lock, you can see all those sparks jumping up. That's actually little bits of steel being scraped off of the face right there. Now, you can see the whole mechanism kind of flops open when I do that. Down inside, this little brass depression here called the pan is going to be a small amount of gunpowder. So that's my primer. That's going to ignite once the sparks hit it. They'll then burn down through a hole in the side of the barrel called the vent, into the barrel where the main charge is with the ball, whatever you'll actually be firing, setting off the gun. So there's a couple of different chain reactions that actually go on to make this thing work. Now to load it, in this case, because it is actually a military weapon, I'm going to use a cartridge for this one here. So the cartridge is just a paper tube that holds the pre-measured amount of gunpowder that I need for the prime and for the main charge, and it would also include the musket ball as well. So I'm going to take that and pair it. I'm going to pour a little bit of gunpowder into the pan there, and then shut that. So that will keep that closed so the pan doesn't just empty itself. I'm going to pour the rest of the powder down inside the barrel. And at this point, the ball, which would be wrapped inside this paper, would be thrown down with the paper, which means the ball won't just roll out of the barrel by accident while I'm carrying the thing around. I'm going to draw the rammer out, ram that charge down, so that makes sure that everything is as far down towards the breech of the gun as possible. You ideally want the powder and the ball packed right on top of the breech, the back of the barrel. Otherwise, if there's any air inside there, that extra pressure in there from the air can actually cause the barrel to swell or even burst if you're not careful. So you want to make sure it's set down all the way. It is not possible to blow the musket ball down like we often see in film. It's just not going to happen. Okay, so at this point, the gun is at what's called half cock. This is the safety. If I pull the trigger, nothing will happen. If I give it one more click back, the gun is now actually able to fire. Here we go. So you can see the initial prime going off, the main charge. It works pretty well. We're fortunate right now that it's not raining, because of course the biggest problem with these guns is the moisture getting into the gunpowder. Although even if they do get wet once dried, they will actually function pretty well if you know how to use these things. They're pretty reliable guns. So these types of guns continue to be used by the US Army up really until the 1840s, so just beyond our time period when they start replacing them with percussion guns. So percussion guns have a little percussion cap, almost like on a cap gun, that actually ignites the gun. It's a whole lot more reliable than the flint is like this. But it's still it's a time-tested system. Now, like I said, this is a military weapon, which means it's built really heavy, it's built for the soldiers to use and not break easily. It's also got a little bit of the barrel sticking out for the stock. And what that's for is fitting with the bayonet. So the bayonet is a blade that fits right on the front of the musket. And what that does is turns this into a spear effectively as well as a firearm. There's only one shot. So if the enemy is, attacking you and you fire off your shot, this is your next line of defense. These are something that are, really characteristic of the military guns in the time period. With this type of bayonet, it's what's called the socket bayonet, so we can actually still be loaded and fired while the bayonet is on there because I can still access the barrel. It's off to the side and out of the way as I'm trying to ram. That's why the blade is off on the right-hand side of the gun. So that's my little extra line of defense. Now, in the 1830s, Every man in the United States from 18 to 45 is actively serving in the militia, which means you need to provide your own musket, your own bayonet, a knapsack, a cartridge box that will hold 24 rounds of ammunition, 24 blank cartridges, and then 3 flints. So you need to show up on the first Tuesday in May for a training day every single year with all that stuff. If you don't have it, you're fined for it. So it's something that we take very seriously in the time period. What you also see besides the mandatory militias are volunteer militia companies. So these are guys that take it a whole lot more seriously. They buy real, good military muskets. Everyone has a matching gun, everyone has a matching bayonet, and they actually go out and buy uniforms too. So they're actually uniformed militia companies. And those are really the very popular militia companies in our time period. Those are the ones that you want to belong to if you really care about the militia or anything like that. So those are the ones you see a lot in the cities and out here as well. Sturbridge actually had a rifle company, so guys that carried rifles instead of muskets. They had an artillery company, they had a light infantry company, and they also had a cavalry company that they shared with Southbridge in the time period. So, as part of those training days, one thing the men would do besides all the marching around is they would often do target shooting. They'd also be doing all sorts of practice to load and fire their guns as quickly as possible. Now I've just been kind of leisurely going through and loading the gun right now, but a soldier that is trained or a militiaman that's been trained should be able to fire off 3 to 4 shots in a minute. You think that's possible with an old gun like this? Oh, you can't do that with this gun. What do you guys think? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, all right, there we go. All right, let me fire this one off and then we'll actually give it a try. So if someone wants to volunteer to use their timepiece and keep time, you have a timepiece? All right, how many with a hand up actually does? You want a time? Okay, so let me go ahead and fire this off. And then once I fire, I'm going to have you just start timing as soon as I pull the trigger, okay? All right, hopefully it goes off. Ready, aim, fire. So again, having the powder already measured out into that cartridge is really a big advantage for the soldier. All right, what was the time?
20 seconds.
20 seconds, not bad. So 3 to 4 rounds in a minute would be good. Now granted, this is just training. So if I'm actually in battle with someone shooting back at me, I'm probably in a different frame of mind. But the idea is to make this all muscle memory so I can do it very rapidly. So the alternative, besides just using a cartridge slowly, is what you might use if you were out hunting, although hunting wasn't that common because there wasn't much to hunt around here in the 1830s. But if I was out at, say, a target shoot or a turkey shoot in the time period, actually firing at targets for prize money or for prizes of various sorts, whether it be livestock, prize birds, silver pitchers, prize muskets, anything like that, generally I'm going to go out there not with my cartridges, but with my horn and pouch. This has everything loose inside of it. So if you want to time me again, this time I'll do it just loading from the horn. I'll still try to hustle, but you'll see the difference and why those cartridges are so important. All right, so whenever you're ready. All right, here we go. So I'm going to start by taking out the stopper and the horn. I have a little measure here, and that gives me the amount of powder that I need. That goes down inside the barrel. Now I'll go and pull a piece of wadding out of my shot pouch, and also be pulling out the actual shot that I was going to be firing as well, and then load that in. So that just goes down inside the barrel. Ram that down. So it's loaded, but it's not primed yet. So this is the thing that's different, besides the timing, is when you start with the military cartridge, you prime first.
No.
Generally, when you load with the horn, you do that last. Now we're ready. How was that? Just take a guess.
About 38 seconds.
Okay, that's a lot. That's almost twice the amount of time it took me to fire from the cartridge. So again, this is why this is very important to train and get used to shooting like that, because on the battlefield, again, with a single shot musket, the enemy's charging at you, you don't want to have to use your bayonet. You better be able to load really quickly. So that's very, very important. Yes. So that's the actual ball. So the gun is what's called a 69 caliber. So it's 0.69 of 100 of a bore. So it's just under 3/4 of an inch. So the purpose of the militia is they're effectively the first line of defense if the nation is invaded. So the U.S. Army, even the U.S. Army today, is very small, and the time period is only a few thousand men, and they're scattered all over the United States. So if we're attacked, say in Massachusetts here, but most of the guys are out west or up in Maine or down in Florida fighting the Seminoles in the period, which they are, the Seminole Indians, then we have a problem, right? So by having every man from 18 to 45 trained in the military, in the militia, the thinking is if the nation is invaded, the entire male population in that area rises up and will defeat them, or at least keep them at bay until the professionals actually get there. That's the whole thinking. So it's a system that they continue to do. I mean, it goes back to even before colonization. It goes back to an English system that was created during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. And they basically kind of alter it and recreate it here in America. But eventually, by 1840, in Massachusetts at least, it changes. So there's no longer the mandatory militia service of every man from 18 to 45, and you're not required to buy all your equipment. The only guys that are training are the ones in the volunteer companies, and they're now actually being provided their arms and equipment by the state. So that's the difference. Every other man that's of military age is still liable to serve if there is a war, so kind of like the draft today, but they're not actively out there training. So they're not losing that entire day in May when they could be out planting crops and doing other trades. So that's why they have it in the time period. Someone else had a question? Yes?
The flash that's there, it's pretty close to your eyes. Could that be a hazard, or was it? Or
Usually not. So the way that the gun is actually made, at the back of the pan, it actually raises up, so there's actually a little bit of a fence, they call it, so that the flash is actually deflected up. I also have on this is actually kind of a modern contraption here called the flash guard. So when we're firing in rank in the militia, the guy next to me might get sprayed with the sparks. This is something they require a lot at sites today for firing these if you're actually going to be shooting next to each other, just so you don't hurt the guy next to you. But yeah, generally in the time period, it was just something you kind of got used to. The whole notion of soldiers, going to pull the trigger and looking away, that never happened. That's just, why would you waste a shot like that, That's not part of the training. But yeah, if you notice when I fire, it tends to go up above my head instead of right towards my face, which is handy. I like that. There it is. So does anybody else have any questions?
What else is in that little thing?
It's just what the bullets would be held inside of. I've got an extra flint for the gun. I've got a turn screw. So that's used for loosening up the screws here and the bolts to replace the flint or take the gun apart. So everything I would need to maintain the gun while I'm out shooting would be inside here.
Dude, what about that thing?
What's that? This?
No.
Oh, this?
Yeah, that horn.
So this is a powder horn. That's made from a cow horn.
Ow.
So it's already naturally hollow because they have, well, not naturally hollow. There's tissue inside the cow's horn. So when you butcher a steer, you can use that horn. You basically pull the tissue out and you can use that. It's a waterproof container.